Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
Happy Thursday. It's July 23rd, 2026. Great to be with you on a Thursday, and as we always say every day here on EWTN's Catholic Connection. And flying through this week, and next week, the last week of July. Wow, time flies when you're having fun, and we are going to have a great time on the program this morning. Of course, it's a Thursday, and that means we are joined by the amazing Father Mitch Pacwa for our Cultural Connections. 2 segments with the good Padre, and then we're going to hear from Sister Bernadette Mota. She's a director of mission advancement for the Salesian Sisters and co-founder of the Fiat Project. So we're going to talk about the Fiat Project. Of course, the Fiat coming from the Gospels and the Gospel of Luke and our Blessed Mother's Fiat. I am the handmaid of the Lord. Let it be done to me according to thy word. So what's really wonderful about this, and it's so funny when I was doing research for the show today, reading about this project before I got to their paragraph in terms of summarizing everything, I was thinking, even if these young women who attend one of these events, even if they decide that, discern, which often happens, that religious life is not for them, what a great exercise and what a great experience. And so here's a summary. The Fiat Project, an 8-month program designed to accompany women in their 20s and 30s to discern God's call and accept it as their mission. The overall goal is for young women to grow in holiness and realize that no matter what vocation God calls them to, consecrated life, marriage, or consecrated virginity, each vocation is meant to be lived in a deep relationship with Christ and at the service of the church and the world. So I really love what they're doing here, and I think it's important for all of us to have our own discernment moments. There are many of them as we move along in life. It's not just one time where we say, okay, I'm discerning this. Whenever you're moving on to, let's say, something you want to do for the Lord or something you feel that you're called to do, the whole discernment process is crucial. And it doesn't have to be anything formal. It can just be, as St. Teresa of Avila, my patron, always said, a conversation with God. But you must always include God in these conversations because he's the one who has a perfect plan or design for you. Even if it's, maybe a small little project, he will give you an answer. You just have to keep knocking on the door. Just as it says in Revelation, I stand at the door and knock. And if you open it, I will come in and dine with you. So we'll discuss discernment, not just for the Fiat Project, but overall. Second hour of the program for our 2 cent segment. I saw a great article this morning all about different sites across the country where you can obtain an indulgence for the year of St. Francis. And I just want to remind you that is available, and the year will wrap up January 10th. So even if you can't make it overseas for the big events, especially coming up in October, this is a really cool thing to do. And there are so many wonderful places where you can go and think about and pray, about St. Francis and his life and his commitment to Christ and the church. And also, of course, you can obtain certain indulgences, as the Pope has announced. And we'll review that and look at a few places. We are blessed in the Archdiocese of Detroit to have many places to do that, including different parishes and also the wonderful Solanus Casey Center in Motown. If you ever get to the Midwest, if it's on your bucket list, for example, those of you who are traveling for our wonderful Grand Hotel Getaway. By the way, we have 2 rooms left, I believe, if you're interested. I talked to John Hill yesterday. It's an opportunity to visit the many shrines in the Archdiocese of Detroit, and just outside downtown Detroit is the amazing Solanus Casey Center. It's a center for the Capuchins there, and they do so much great work, but there's also the tomb of Blessed Solanus Casey, and there's a beautiful museum depicting his life of humble service. It's really wonderful. There's a wonderful church there as well. So that's one of the places you can visit in terms of the year of St. Francis. We're also going to be talking with Father Pacholczyk, and I told him to be on standby because we were waiting for what was going to happen in France. And unfortunately, they did push through that euthanasia bill. And so what kind of message does this send? And I think it's really important to look at this because the Holy Father has continued several times in the last 2 months, most recently, talking about this epidemic of loneliness. Of course, we've talked a lot about that here in the United States, and how many people may be feeling lonely or afraid, especially if they're elderly, are thinking, well, you know what, it's just going to be easier for me to take my own life. What does it matter? I'm lonely anyway. I'm miserable anyway. So this kind of an attitude and this kind of a law, it's just very dangerous and deadly. quite literally, and we'll talk about that with Father Tad Pacholczyk. So that's a show for today. Hope you can stay tuned for the entire 2 hours. We'll have some great conversation. Let's take a look at the weather, which again is part of our news this morning. We have extreme heat again, and Bertha apparently now is on her way toward Texas. The National Weather Service saying dangerous heat will expand from the Gulf Coast into the southern plains and the desert southwest. That's through this weekend. An additional extreme heat is impacting the Pacific Northwest, and it will shift to the northern plains by this weekend. And as we mentioned, Tropical Storm Bertha expected to continue to impact portions of the northwestern Gulf Coast. That's from central Louisiana to the upper Texas coast today. We'll have more on that in the news as well. It's already 5 minutes past the hour on a busy Thursday morning. We appreciate your listenership. Thanks so much for tuning into this program. Right now, though, at 5 minutes past the hour, let's check the news here at EWTN. Well, the Vatican yesterday confirming that a church trial against a famous ex-Jesuit priest accused of spiritual and sexual abuse of women is ongoing, and defended the secrecy of the proceedings as necessary to guarantee the process. Associated Press is reporting an Italian blogger said earlier this week that an acquittal verdict had already been reached in the case against the Reverend Marko Ivan Rupnik, a Slovenian priest or artist whose mosaic designs decorate Vatican chapels and churches and basilicas around the world. But a statement from the Vatican press office saying the report was totally unfounded and that judges were continuing to examine documentation provided by the dioceses involved, the Jesuits, the parties concerned, and from the press. EWTN News is reporting nearly 6 lawmakers sending a letter to the Department of Justice urging a federal investigation into the deaths of the DC-5, the 5 allegedly late-term aborted babies recovered from a Washington abortion clinic some 4 years ago. Senator Mike Lee of Utah and Representative Chris Smith of New Jersey, along with more than 50 other GOP lawmakers, calling on Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche to comprehensively investigate the circumstances surrounding the deaths. The lawmakers are requesting DOJ to ensure the children receive a proper and respectful burial once the investigation is complete and all responsible parties have been brought to justice. In 2022, the DC-5 were found, as EWTN News explains, at the home of Catholic convert and pro-life activist Lauren Handy. The group Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising, a secular organization that demonstrates against abortion, saying it obtained the remains from reported whistleblowers who believe the circumstances might have violated federal prohibitions on partial birth abortion or the failure to provide care to infants born alive. In the letter said earlier this week, lawmakers saying the babies' remains are held by the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in Washington, and lawmakers are now calling for autopsies to find out if those babies were victims of the crimes of infanticide or partial birth abortion. The president back in Washington after a visit to Georgia for a campaign-style speech with midterms fast approaching. President Trump speaking yesterday at Wheeler High School just outside of Atlanta. The president calling the dignified transfer ceremony he attended yesterday one of the toughest things he's had to do.
I attended the dignified transfer ceremony for 4 great U.S. service members killed in the conflict with Iran. I say return to American soil at Dover.
Meanwhile, the Queens neighborhood is planning a candlelight vigil to honor the fallen soldier killed in Friday's attack on a military base in Jordan. The American flag flying at half-staff at the family home of 28-year-old Sergeant Angel Rampersad, whose body has been returned now to the U.S.
This is a tragic loss for our nation. It's a tragic loss for our community. More importantly, it's a tragic loss for the family. We're all heartbroken.
It's devastating, especially when it, hits so close to home.
Rampersad fulfilled her mother's wishes and attended John Jay College for 2 years before enlisting in the Army about 7 years ago. The Secret Service is ramping up security for the rescheduled White House Correspondents' Dinner following an assassination attempt at the original event back in April. Secret Service Director Sean Curran acknowledged global instability is playing a big part in the agency's threat profile.
Just generally speaking, we are in a heightened level of a threat environment right now. It's no secret. There are things happening around the globe that are always going to impact how we move, and that's how we evaluate what our security plan is going to be.
Friday's dinner will be held at the Waldorf Astoria instead of the previous Washington Hilton. There will be a much shorter guest list and enhanced security. This all comes after 31-year-old Cole Allen of California was accused of sprinting through security with guns and knives in an attempt to assassinate President Trump and other White House officials in attendance at the last dinner. The House passing an over $1 trillion annual defense policy bill, the 2027 National Defense Authorization Act, was passed 216 to 212, with 6 Democrats joining most Republicans to vote in favor. A majority of Democrats did not support the measure, with some citing their opposition to the Iran war, others expressing concern over a provision that would expand the collaboration between the U.S. and Israel. That legislation now goes to the Senate. And the House has also passed a measure that combined 2 separate issues, a federal voter ID and a ban on stock trading by lawmakers.
On this vote, the yeas are 232, the nays are 198. The bill is passed without objection. A motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
The 198 lawmakers, all Democrats, voting against that package yesterday, with 13 Republicans joining them. The measures both have large degrees of public support. And the U.S. is going to help Saudi Arabia develop nuclear energy. The U.S. Energy Department announcing yesterday that agreement allows the kingdom to use American technology to build nuclear reactors. It also allows the country to enrich uranium. The deal now goes to Congress. Natalie Rodriguez reports a New York federal judge officially scheduling the high-profile criminal trial of ousted Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro and his wife.
The criminal trial of deposed Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and his wife Celia Flores is officially set for June 1st of next year. The couple have been held in a Brooklyn detention center since a dramatic U.S. military raid in January, pleaded not guilty to federal narco-terrorism charges. While prosecutors allege a massive state-backed drug conspiracy, defense lawyers are aiming to throw the case out entirely. The judge scheduled a crucial preliminary hearing for November 17th to weigh the defense's claims that the couple's capture was a kidnapping. Natalie Rodriguez, Miami.
Allegations of race-based favoritism in admissions bringing a federal civil rights probe to East Carolina University's medical school. The Education Department launching the Brody School of Medicine investigation as part of a joint push with the DOJ. Federal officials have not disclosed what prompted the action, but they say they're looking into whether the school gave certain applicants an edge based on race following the Supreme Court affirmative action ban. ECU was one of 5 medical schools added this week to a federal sweep covering over 20 institutions nationwide. And Mark Mayfield tells us that heat wave that's now underway is leading to more smog on the West Coast.
An ozone advisory starts today for parts of Los Angeles County. It will remain in effect through Monday night as a prolonged heat wave fuels a multi-day smog event. The South Coast Air Quality Management District says air quality is expected to reach unhealthy levels for sensitive groups in the San Fernando Valley and San Gabriel Valley. There will be unhealthy conditions or worse possible in the Santa Clarita Valley. Officials say that children, older adults, and people with asthma should limit prolonged outdoor exertion when the air quality reaches unhealthy levels. I'm Mark Mayfield.
And Tropical Storm Bertha, as we mentioned earlier, on its way to the great Lone Star State of Texas. A National Hurricane Center says Bertha is now about 100 miles southwest of New Orleans and moving toward East Texas with sustained winds of 45 miles per hour. And a tropical storm warning is in effect along the coast from the south of New Orleans to just west of Houston. The storm is expected to make landfall in Texas sometime this afternoon. It is a Thursday morning. Father Mitch Pacholczyk, Cultural Connections, up next. Stay tuned. Fifteen minutes past the hour. It's a Thursday morning. Every Thursday we have 2 segments with the amazing Father Mitch Pacholczyk. Father, the stories coming out continue to be reported, especially in more conservative media, Catholic Christian media, regarding these concerns over this movement of the Democratic Socialists. And they seem to have this grip on the Democratic Party, even though there are some that are speaking out. Even Andrew Cuomo has spoken out. Clyburn has spoken out. Others too, but it seems like they just was pushing their agenda across the country. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Oh, sure, my pleasure. Yeah, I think this is a real concern. One of the reasons that the Democratic Socialists are able to put their agenda into such prominence is because too few voters engage in the primaries. And Democrats are not coming out for the Democrat primaries, but the Democratic Socialists are very well organized, and they are. Secondly, they apparently have their own meetings where they are defining their policies. For instance, I don't know where they met or who exactly were the people voting, but they voted against having the Senate, the President, and the Supreme Court, which would be an extraordinarily radical change of our politics. That would change our Constitution. And I don't know if they plan to have a constitutional convention or not to do that, but which the Constitution requires. But that would be a major change, and it would further empower them. We mentioned that last week. The Senate, having a Senate with 2 senators from each state, big or small, was proposed by the state of Connecticut to protect itself and Rhode Island and Delaware and the other smaller states from the influence of Virginia and New York and Pennsylvania, which were very large states and growing in population, had the largest population as well as much larger size. It was a way to keep balance so that those small states, they revise history. They don't look up the discussions of the Constitutional Congress. They don't understand, what Madison wrote down in about all the process and principles. They rewrite history, and they correctly assume 2 things. One, a lot of Americans know far too little about our history or our civics. Too few Americans know those things very well. Secondly, they assume, again, correctly, that most civilians do not come out for the party primaries. Too few people come out for the general election, but an even tinier minority come out for the primaries. And while, just as a little side point, while a lot of people complain about, I don't like either candidate, they didn't campaign at the primary level, which is where you choose which candidate your party has.
Right.
And people neither campaign for it, nor do they go out and meet the candidates at that level, talk to them. If there's any time that a political candidate wants to speak to the voters, it is at the primary. They are open to almost any group. They're looking for almost any audience they can find.
Right.
I meet with them during the primary season. I know this to be a fact. They are delighted to meet people before the primary, and even smaller groups of citizens, because they know it is so hard to get to people to come out and vote, so they want to meet. So that is the time to come out and examine this. Well, knowing that people don't show up in the primary season, the Democrat Socialists are working to bring their people in their numbers, and they can overwhelm Democratic Party loyalists who have the more standard Democrat candidate. And this is problematic.
It's interesting how many, we were talking about this during the break, Father, how many Democrats are concerned about this and are speaking out. I mentioned a quote I saw recently from Representative James Clyburn from South Carolina. Let me read you this story. Democratic Party elder and prior presidential kingmaker Representative James Clyburn from South Carolina jabbing at progressive U.S. Senate candidate Abdul El-Sayed on Wednesday, it was yesterday, calling out the lack of black Democrats at this event. Clyburn, who is supporting El-Sayed's opponent in the primary, Representative Haley Stevens, told this particular outlet, listen to this, Father, I saw a picture that concerned me from the rally. I didn't see a single person that looks like me. That tells me all I need to know. Clyburn was talking about an image from a recent El-Sayed rally in Detroit, a longtime Democratic stronghold in the state, thanks in large part to the city's large African-American population. So you've got, as I said, Clyburn, you've got Cuomo, you've got a number of other prominent Democrats that tend to lean heavily to the left that are saying this does not represent us and we've gone way too far. There's a civil war going on within the party, but we're seeing more white voters, baby boomers, and we were talking about this in the break as well, Father, going for these type of candidates.
Right. Well, it's not baby boomers.
Well, there's some. No, there's some at the event yesterday. They were all older white voters. Yeah.
Interesting, because the candidates seem to be much more of people that there's one very important article showing that a lot of these candidates are and the people voting for them are well educated. Upper or middle class people who have majored in areas they think are very important to them and to the meaning of life, such as people who are going for degrees in gender studies and degrees on ethnic studies, which usually means racial issues. And what they find is they can't get very good jobs with those degrees. These are the kinds of degrees, like many other degrees in the liberal arts. You can't make money doing this because it's only there to teach other people courses in gender studies and in ethnic studies. There's no, they don't produce anything except other majors in that field. Unlike, and frankly, this is the same thing with theology majors. Theology majors don't make, and I speak as one, and philosophy majors, they don't produce anything except big ideas. And you can't sell those very well except at the university. And there are even more limited jobs in gender studies and ethnic studies than there are in theology and philosophy.
Father, hang on. We have to take a break. We'll pick this up on the other side. We are talking with Father Mitch Pacwa. Our Cultural Connections segments continue right after the break. Stay tuned. "27 minutes past the hour, always having very important and insightful conversations and tapping into the great wisdom and knowledge of Father Mitch Pacwa. Of course, one of our EWTN favorites. So, Father, the reason I was mentioning the baby boomers, I was telling you, I was flipping through the news this morning, and there were a couple of summaries. Obviously, this is a big story here locally in southeastern Michigan with the Senate candidates. But the image behind that big event with El-Sayed, AOC was there and a few other very prominent extreme leftist Democrats. The crowd in the background, there may have been some younger people in the audience, but the crowd that they showed behind the candidates, where they put the bleachers up and they're all there with their signs and whatnot, I took a good look at it. It was mostly people in their 60s, a lot of maybe people in their 70s, a lot of folks with gray hair, not too many young people standing behind the candidate. So I thought that was very interesting. And the commentators were saying that this is another group of people that are following these Democratic Socialists for similar reasons as to what you explained regarding that study, in terms of their frustration with their lives, their jobs didn't turn out the way they had hoped. So they're taking out their frustrations, and they think this might be the answer, which to me makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah. Well, if they're baby boomers, they may also be pining for the flesh pots of the 60s, when protests and such and hope for socialist change may have been going on. But I think in terms of the people who are the future of the Democratic Socialists, this would be the people in their 30s and 40s, and this was the group that Silver does various studies. He's been known to be very successful in predicting outcomes of elections. That this is his focus, not just studying things, but seeing what's going on so that he can make a prediction, not favoring his side so much, though he does that a little bit, but it seems to be mostly he's trying to see where he can get an accurate description of the voters. And here, for the Democratic Socialists, they are a very large percent of them. I think it's in the 70 percentile make less than $60,000 with PhDs or master's degrees, and that's far, far less than people who are in the professions or people who are in the various trades that don't have degrees. And I sometimes would see among liberal arts professors, I mentioned philosophy and theology professors being in kind of the same boat as ethnic studies and gender studies people, that you don't make anything. You don't produce, but you talk about issues that are important to certain groups, about big ideas. But as a result of not producing anything except articles and books for each other, which is a small group, your books.
Right, there's a frustration that their view of the world did not, take off, and they've had little or no success.
That the world doesn't reward them for it very much.
I'm so brilliant. Why aren't you rewarding me? This is very frustrating.
Why is the plumber making more than I am?
Yes, exactly. Let me read this one summary that I found regarding the study you were referencing this morning, Father, and I think this hits a nail on the head. Silver's work suggesting that the DSA's base is not the traditional working class, blue-collar or pink-collar workers, but rather, as you mentioned, Father, overeducated, undercapitalized, and politically disillusioned individuals who feel they are owed success due to their credentials. The demographic is more likely to be drawn to progressive, redistributive policies and to identify with Democratic Socialist platforms. So they're leaning toward this way of life that they think is going to be the answer. But the thing that amazes me so much, and maybe I shouldn't be surprised by this, is these are educated people. Now, by whom they are educated, I guess that's where you have to consider the source, right?
Yeah.
But how many times have they seen socialism or communism work anywhere to the benefit of the people? You think they would be smart enough to do a little bit more research. It doesn't, hasn't, and will not work.
Well, actually, that would a good friend of mine here down in Alabama oftentimes points out some people get educated beyond their intelligence. And that would be the case. They don't check out to see if socialism would work. They don't know, and I guarantee you this, they do not want to teach a history of the effects of communism. They don't want people to know that not only does it not is it not effective, but it is catastrophic for human life. Socialism is the largest cause of killing in the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
Socialistic government, whether it be National Socialism, which the acronym for National Socialist is Nazi. People don't remember that Nazi stood for not National Socialist Workers' Party.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but Father, I don't mean to interrupt you, but this is what drives me nuts. This is what gets my Italian up. It doesn't take much, I know. You've known me for a long time. But you have many of these candidates, or even these people involved in promoting the Democratic Socialists, who are children of immigrants, let's say first-generation immigrants, who fled from socialist and communist countries to come to the United States, and their kids are the ones who are in the DSA. How do you explain that?
Well, here's going to be one of my guesses. I mentioned this last week, that part of the profile of these Democratic Socialist leaders, the candidates, look at their background. Yes, Mayor Mamdani came from immigrant parents,
mm-hmm.
but they were very wealthy. And
I know that, but they still, when they do the interviews, there is a man that was interviewed, I think it was with Martha McCallum on Fox, and he was going on and on about how horrible Venezuela was for his family, and then he wants to change it and change the United States and make it more like Venezuela. So is he's just not realizing because he is in a wealthy family? But I don't understand if his parents suffered like that. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, and like I said, this is exactly why my friend talks about being educated beyond their intelligence. They are not using good sense. They may not have good sense. Don't underestimate the possibility that these people have little common sense.
Well, what's that old saying? Common sense isn't so common anymore.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
If ever it was.
Yeah.
And so this is part of the reality. They manifest quite clearly that they are not being particularly sensible here.
Mm.
So we have to pay close attention to this. But they truly, you ask young people about the history of communism, and they really don't have.
They don't know.
Clue.
Same thing with socialism. Father, we're out of time. Great discussion.
And that's
we have
the fault of the teachers.
Yes, exactly. And as I said earlier, by whom were they taught? That's a big question.
Yep.
Father, great insights. Thank you so much. More Catholic Connection coming your way in about 2 minutes. Stay tuned. Minutes past the hour on a Thursday. Excited to speak with Sister Bernadette Mota, Director of Mission Advancement for the Salesian Sisters and co-founder of the Fiat Project. Sister, good morning. First of all, give our listeners, I'm sure they're familiar with St. John Bosco, but give us a little background on the Salesian Sisters, and thanks for joining us again.
Yes, thank you for having me with you. So the Salesian Sisters, our official title is the Daughters of Mary, Help of Christians, and we were founded by St. John Bosco and St. Mary Monsterello in northern Italy in the late 1800s. Our mission is to help young people to grow in holiness. And actually, for the sisters worldwide, we are the largest women's order in the world, with 11,500 sisters worldwide.
Wow.
In the U.S., we're just not as known as we are in some other countries. But yes, we are the largest women's order under one superior general. And so it's such a blessing to be a worldwide congregation whose mission is geared towards holiness for young people.
Well, let's talk about the Fiat Project. What exactly is it, Sister?
So the Fiat Project was really born from a need where we saw many young adult women seeking to live a deeper life of holiness, but not quite sure how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is accompany young women to discern their vocation in their life and to accept that as their mission. Now, we call vocation their path to holiness in a broad sense. So we do look not only at religious life, but also married life and consecrated virginity too, to help them to really seek God's plan and to accept it with joy and passion, to know that they have a place in the church and the world where God is very excited to use their gifts and talents for good. So accompanying them in that process. And It's an 8-month program that we actually began during COVID because we weren't able to reach young women the same way we had before. So some good things did come out of COVID, and so this was one of them because it really opened our doors to a wider audience than what we had been doing prior. Before, it was more of a local type of ministry that we were doing this program, but now we're nationwide and actually worldwide because we've had young women join us from other countries as well for this program because it's hybrid, both in person or online, depending on where the person lives.
So it's an 8-month program. If it's in person, how does that work, sister?
So the in-person group they meet. We have a few locations where we do meet. So we have San Antonio, Texas, Colorado Springs, Colorado. I think this year we're going to have a couple locations on the eastern coast too. So both of our provinces, our western province of the sisters and our eastern province, we collaborate for this program, and we're able to meet with those people in person for those who live near one of our convents. Otherwise, the people who join us online are doing the same program that the people who are meeting in person are doing. But when it's time for small groups, the ones who are in person meet with their live small group, and the people who are on Zoom meet in a small group on Zoom.
Beautiful. Talking with Sister Bernadette Mota, Director of Mission Advancement for the Salesian Sisters and co-founder of the Fiat Project. So, Sister, can you do a combined program? For example, what if you'd like to come to some of the events in person and yet mostly you're working with this program online? Can you do both?
Yes, we have some women who do that.
That's awesome, because that gives you kind of both an opportunity to meet in person. Face-to-face is often great.
Especially for those who travel more, or maybe they're coming from a further distance. We have some who would drive an hour, hour and a half to come to our program each time. And when the weather's not as good, they join us on Zoom instead.
So I'm wondering, and I'm sure our listeners would like to know this too, with the online and just both programs, what type of topics? Are there talks? Are there group discussions? How does this actually work practically in terms of the material?
It's a combination of both.
Yeah.
So we do have talks that are given, and so we have sisters who prepare those talks and present those talks. Some talks are done live. Other talks we actually send ahead of time, so that way they can listen and reflect and take some more time to really digest the material beforehand. And then when we come in person, the ones that were done in video format before, then we do a little recap of the video and we go into small groups and share. But then besides the talks, a big portion of it is the fellowship and the discussion in the small groups for the young adult women to be able to meet other women who are their same age, who are really seeking the same thing in life, and to know that they're not alone. So it's building community. A big part of it is community and walking, journeying together in that path to holiness. So this is really geared towards women in their 20s and 30s. We do take young women who are a little bit younger. They have to be at least 18, but it's really geared towards those who have lived a little bit more, so 20s and 30s age range. And it's been really beautiful because, again, they come from all walks of life, all economic backgrounds, faith perspectives, but all Catholic and discerning God's plan in their life. So we tell them if they're just at the beginning of growing in the relationship with God and maybe don't have a solid prayer life yet, this might not be for them. But if they've already kind of grown and they're just seeking more, this is perfect for them.
So what kind of fruit have you seen? I'm sure a great deal, being that this has been in the works for several years. Tell us about that.
Yes, so we have had a number of women enter religious life from this program. Pretty much 1 out of every 10 who does a program enters religious life, which is very good odds for a program that's not specifically just for discerning religious life. But 1 out of every 10 enters. We've had over about 30 enter religious life, some of them with us, some with other orders, because we're not just trying to get them into our community, we're trying to help them to discern where they're meant to be. And so that's really been beautiful. And we've also had women who are now married. Actually, in about a couple months, I'm going to a wedding for one of the young women who is in our program. So I'm excited for that. And we've had others who have gotten married. And again, just for us to see their joy in really finding where God wants them to be and to have that patience along the process. Each program that we have has a specific theme. Each meeting that we have has a various theme. So whether it's looking at some of the harder ones for them, oftentimes are looking at their attachments that they have, because if you're not free You need to get rid of those things in your life that are taken away from God to make more space for Him to really discern His plan for you. So looking at attachments, looking at your past history, and to see it from more of a salvation history standpoint rather than just seeing it from your own eyes, seeing it from the eyes of God and His plan for you, and really to seek that healing in that process, because again, you need to be healed or in the process of healing to know God's plan for you and to really embrace it with greater love. Now, we do look at vocations, obviously, so we have a whole session on marriage where we bring in married couples, and just to see the joy and beauty of married couples who are living out their vocation faithfully and fruitfully. And so oftentimes for the young ladies who are in the program, sometimes they're not thinking about marriage because they've never seen a good marriage themselves.
Great point.
And so once they see what the church's standpoint is on marriage and what it should be and what it could be, sometimes some of them have a conversion and say, oh, maybe I am called to marriage. Yeah. And it's really beautiful when they are able to see that plan for God in their life, and then just to encourage them to be patient in that process too.
This
and then
is
same
so
thing for
important.
religious life. We do a few episodes and sessions on religious life because many people really do not understand what it is. And so how could you seek something that you have no idea or no concept of what it entails?
Mm-hmm. And what I love about this is I'm sure once they go through this type of a program, and that's going to help them develop really good discernment skills, not just for now in their 20s and their 30s, but for the rest of their life. Because we don't just discern once. You know this. I don't have to tell you this. But you don't just discern once. You discern repeatedly. My husband is a deacon. He's been a deacon for 14 years. And I can remember them telling us during formation that, okay, you've discerned to be here now in this program, but the discernment continues until ordination and afterward, because the deacons are required to do several things each year as deacons in the Catholic Church, and discern, okay, am I going to do this type of ministry or that type of ministry? And we discern along with our husbands, obviously, but you always should be moving in the direction of making sure that you're always doing God's will. And then what else can you do? And that's a discernment process. It's prayer. It's talking to people who know you. It's be seeking spiritual direction, reading scripture, looking at the saints.
Actually,
it's a long time process.
Things that you said right there are things that we do in the program. We use scripture every meeting, and then we encourage them to really pray with scripture and read scripture. The participants all have a spiritual director. If they do not have one already, we partner them with one, and we actually have a number of wives of deacons wives who are a part of our program who help us with spiritual direction too. We have a number of sisters who do spiritual direction, and so it's a big part of the program, especially that one-on-one accompaniment too.
So how do you think St. John Bosco would look at this? I think he'd give a big thumbs up, don't you?
Oh, yes.
Love him.
Yeah, especially because that's our mission, helping young people to grow in holiness. Yeah.
Now, I just think this whole idea is just so beautiful, and I love the name, obviously, from Our Lady's, her Fiat. I am the handmaid of the Lord, let it be done according to thy word, not my word, not my plan, but your plan, right? How many women do you have enrolled right now, sister, in the 8-month program?
Actually, we're getting ready for our next cohort. We just finished our last one. We had, I think, about over 100 who finished the program.
Wow.
And it is like I said, it's intense sometimes. So sometimes we usually have maybe about 30 people who after the first month, they're like, no, this is too much for me. Because it is a commitment. And for young people today, commitment is a hard word. It's a hard thing to do. So once they see what it entails, we usually have some drop off. But by the end of the year, I think we had about 100 in our last one that finished in May. And so our next one, we're just starting registrations at the beginning of August. And then the program will begin in October.
So how did they register? Let's give some housekeeping details on that for more information.
So SalesianSistersWest.org. If you go to our website, under the tab of vocations, there is a whole section for the Fiat Project. The registration is not open yet, but it will be starting in just a week or two. So SalesianSistersWest.org.
SalesianSistersWest.org. Again, for folks listening, SalesianSistersWest.org. Okay, we have about 2 minutes left, and the reporter in me must ask a mini version of your story in terms of why you discerned the religious life, sister.
All right. So you were saying earlier about, let it be done according to me, according to your will, Lord. And in my path, it was not that case for a while. It was more of, let it be done according to my will, And so I was a high school and college athlete and more interested in sports than I was in my relationship with God. But when I was in college and through campus ministry and through really great friends that I met, I began to fall more in love with Christ. And I knew at a certain point that I needed to give my whole heart to him, but I didn't know what that meant. And so I was actually at a World Youth Day back in 2002 in Canada in adoration, where I was just overwhelmed with the love of Christ in the Blessed Sacrament. And I knew, like he wanted all of me. And I was like, Jesus, I love you. I will give you everything, whatever you want. Just don't ask me to be a sister. I was like,
well, there's just one thing. I just want to make this clear in my prayer.
Yeah. And so, but gradually, Jesus took me where I needed to be. Yeah. So it was not all of a sudden where I was like, okay, I'm ready. Like it took me a couple more years.
Again, it's a discernment, right? It's a process.
It's a discernment process.
Right? Yeah.
And it's a journey. And when you look back, you're like, oh yeah, like the whole time I saw how God was leading me. But when you're going through it, you feel kind of blind. And so that was kind of me. But I have to say, like every step of the way, Jesus is there, Mary was there, the Holy Spirit was guiding me. And so I entered religious life in 2005 and made my profession in 2009. Now I've been with the sisters since then, and it's been a joy to accompany young women through the process because I know
Sister, what a story. I'm sorry we're out of time. We'd love to have you back on. This is just so beautiful and so fascinating and so needed. So if you want more information about this beautiful Fiat Project discernment program, you can go to the wonderful website, SalesianSistersWest.org, SalesianSistersWest.org. We'll be right back. Talking to my wonderful producer Richard during the break. This hour just flew by. Another great hour coming up. Of course, we have the amazing Father Pacholczyk talking about the impact of France, unfortunately, approving euthanasia. We'll talk about that and what it means not only for Europe but the rest of the world, and how we can stand up against the culture of death and be more a part of the culture of life. So that should be a great conversation. During our 2 cents segment, as I mentioned, I came across an article this morning that was shared with me by my social media leader at my company. Marcy always sends me great articles about different sites you may visit across the United States of America during this year of St. Francis. Speaking of which, I was also telling Richard we got our big box, a ton of mail because we've been away for 3 months. And I received my box from Sophia and EWTN and all the beautiful books they're putting out. And I found my Italy Shrines and Wonders Volume 2, St. Francis. It's the first time I've seen the finished product because it wasn't done when I left. It wasn't out in print yet when I left in April, but here it is, and it looks gorgeous. And we'll be speaking about St. Francis, of course, in hour number 2 in the 2 cent segment. Oh, this book smells so good. Can you hear it? Hear the pages? Anyway, I digress. Okay, so also wanted to remind you, speaking of Italians, my friend Raymond Arroyo, who is a fellow Italian-American, he is always great on issues that matter most. He'll be on the world over tonight, and he's going to be talking with the ambassador to the Holy See, Brian Birch, who's going to be discussing his Independence Day dinner with Pope Leo at the U.S. Embassy in Rome. And then he's also going to be speaking with the U.S. State Department spokesperson on the new report on Cuba just released by the State Department. That is The World Over with the one and only Raymond Arroyo tonight, 8 Eastern on EWTN. More Catholic Connection coming your way on EWTN's Radio Extra. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And our Thursday programming continues here on EWTN's Radio Extra. We appreciate your listenership. Thanks for tuning in. Coming up in hour number 2 of EWTN's Catholic Connection in our 2 cents segment. You know what? We are just over halfway through the year. And we are in the year of St. Francis of Assisi, a holy year, not only, of course, in this country, but around the globe which was announced by Pope Leo toward the end of 2025. And this will run through Epiphany. January 10th of 2027 will wrap up the year of St. Francis. There was a beautiful article that one of my friends and coworkers at Teresa Tomeo Communications, Marcy, sent me regarding different sites you can visit around the country to receive your indulgence. So what I thought we would do, we found this beautiful video, which was actually part of our coverage from our Rome Bureau in EWTN, all about this year of St. Francis. So I thought we could regroup and do a reboot basically in the middle of this year and remind ourselves, what is a holy year? What does it mean, and why for St. Francis of Assisi? Well, I'm sure you know, this year is the 800th year. It will mark 800 years since his passing. So he died October 3rd, 1226. He died down in St. Mary of the Angels area. It's a city now named after St. Mary of the Angels Church, which houses the Porciuncula. That area was a big field in the big valley, and that's where he spent the last days of his life. And so we'll talk about the year of St. Francis and places you can visit. And I want to remind you that we have a beautiful video series that was done by EWTN Mission Advancement. It's called The Unknown St. Francis. It's 8 segments. It's just beautifully filmed, all in Italy on location. My wonderful producer from the Rome Bureau, Anthony Johnson, and I, along with 2 other photographers, traveled to various areas of Italy, including Tuscany, Umbria, and Lazio. Again, it's free, and you can go to ewtn.com/St. Francis. And, of course, there is my latest Italy Shrines and Wonders book, Volume 2, Discovering Sacred Spaces and Fascinating Places in the Life of St. Francis of Assisi. Now, the cool thing is if you download the free series, they give you an opportunity to make a small donation, and you get a copy of this brand new book, which just came out in June. I'm so happy with it. As I was saying, I did see the what we call the galley copy, but it's just so nice when you see the finished project, and it's beautifully laid out. It's very similar to the format of the first book, Italy, Shrines and Wonders, Volume 1, where it has tabs, it has different information on little side places you can go and visit, and it's so beautifully laid out. And we stuck with the plan, with the layout plan from the first book, and we'll continue to do this, God willing, in future Shrines and Wonders books. So again, this is available, the series, and also we'll talk more about the year of St. Francis in our 2 Cents segment. We'll have 2 segments with Father Tab Pacholczyk, of course, from the National Catholic Bioethics Center. He's their lead ethicist, talking about the very sad story out of France regarding the euthanasia bill and what that means for us. We say, oh, it's in France, but you know what? This is spreading around the world, this attitude that life is not sacred. And if you're not, feeling well, or if you're upset about something, that you know what, I can take my own life. It has gotten to that point, unfortunately. They talk about all of these different safeguards that are placed with these measures, and it's just not true. Even if that were the case, it's murder, okay? You can't help someone take their own life. So we'll talk about that with Father Tab Pacholczyk. That's coming up for our second hour of Catholic Connection on a Thursday. All right, weather-wise, let's bring you up to date. Extremely heat and tropical storm Bertha impact. So those are the lead stories on the National Weather Service website. Dangerous heat expanding from the Gulf Coast into the southern plains and desert southwest through the end of the week. Then we have additional extreme heat impacting the Pacific Northwest, shifting to the northern plains by the weekend. So Tropical Storm Bertha, meanwhile, expected to continue to impact portions of the northwestern Gulf Coast from southern central Louisiana to the upper part of the Lone Star State, and that will happen today. 4 minutes past the hour now on a Thursday morning edition of Catholic Connection. Let's check the news here on EWTN's Radio Extra. The Vatican yesterday confirming that a church trial against a famous ex-Jesuit priest accused of spiritual and sexual abuse of women is ongoing, and it also defended the secrecy of the proceedings as necessary to guarantee the process. The Associated Press reporting an Italian blogger said on Monday that an acquittal verdict had been reached in the case against Reverend Marko Rupnik, a Slovenian artist whose mosaic designs decorate Vatican chapels and churches and basilicas around the world. A statement from the Vatican press office saying the report was totally unfounded and that judges were continuing to examine documentation provided by the dioceses involved, the Jesuits, the parties concerned, and information from the press. Nearly 6 U.S. lawmakers sending a letter to the Department of Justice urging a federal investigation into the deaths of the DC-5, the 5 allegedly late-term aborted babies recovered from a D.C. abortion clinic some 4 years ago. As EWTN News explains, Senator Mike Lee from Utah and Representative Chris Smith of New Jersey, along with more than 50 other Republican lawmakers, calling on Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche to comprehensively investigate the circumstances surrounding those deaths. The lawmakers are also requesting the DOJ ensure the children receive a proper and respectful burial once that investigation is finished and all responsible parties have been brought to justice. In 2022, the DC-5 founded the home of a Catholic convert and pro-life activist Lauren Handy. The group Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising, a secular organization that demonstrates against abortion, saying it obtained the remains from reported whistleblowers who believe the circumstances might have violated federal law on partial birth abortion or the failure to provide care to infants born alive. In the letter sent on Monday, lawmakers are saying the baby's remains are held by the office of the chief medical examiner in Washington, and lawmakers are calling for autopsies to find out if the babies were victims of the crimes of infanticide or partial birth abortion. President Trump back in the nation's capital today after visiting Georgia for a campaign-style speech yesterday with the midterms fast approaching. The president speaking yesterday at Wheeler High School just outside of Atlanta. President Trump calling the dignified transfer ceremony he attended yesterday one of the toughest things he's had to do.
I attended the dignified transfer ceremony for 4 great U.S. service members killed in the conflict with Iran. As they returned to American soil at Dover.
A Queens neighborhood, meanwhile, is planning a candlelight vigil to honor the fallen soldier killed in Friday's attack, one of them on a military base in Jordan. The American flag flying at half-staff at the family home of 28-year-old Sergeant Angel Rampersad, whose body has now been returned to the U.S.
This is a tragic loss for our nation. It's a tragic loss for our community. More importantly, it's a tragic loss for the family. We're all heartbroken.
It's devastating, especially when it, hits so close to home.
Rampersad fulfilled her mother's wishes, attending John Jay College for 2 years before enlisting in the Army about 7 years ago. The Secret Service ramping up security for the rescheduled White House Correspondents' Dinner, this following the assassination attempt at the original event back in April. Secret Service Director Sean Curran acknowledging global instability is playing a big part in the agency's threat profile.
Just generally speaking, we are in a heightened level of a threat environment right now. It's no secret. There are things happening around the globe that are always going to impact how we move, and that's how we evaluate what our security plan is going to be.
Friday's dinner will be held at the Waldorf Astoria instead of the previous Washington Hilton. There will also be a shorter guest list and enhanced security. This after 31-year-old Cole Allen of California was accused of sprinting through security with guns and knives in an attempt to assassinate President Trump and other White House officials in attendance at the last dinner. And the House has passed an over $1 trillion annual defense policy bill. The 2027 National Defense Authorization Act was passed 216 to 212, with 6 Democrats joining most Republicans to vote in favor. A majority of Democrats did not support the measure, with some citing their opposition to the Iran war, others expressing concern over a provision that would expand the collaboration between the U.S. and Israeli militaries. That legislation now going to the Senate. And the White House also passed a measure that combined, passed a measure that combined 2 separate issues, federal voter ID and a ban on stock trading by lawmakers.
On this vote, the yeas are 232, the nays are 198. The bill is passed without objection. A motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
The 198 lawmakers, all Democrats, voting against the package on Wednesday, with 13 joining Republicans. The measures both have large degrees of public support. And the U.S. is going to help Saudi Arabia develop nuclear energy. The U.S. Energy Department announcing yesterday that agreement allows the kingdom to use American technology to build nuclear reactors. It also allows the country to enrich uranium. The deal now goes to Congress. And a New York federal judge, as Natalie Rodriguez explains, officially scheduling the high-profile criminal trial of ousted Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro and his wife.
The criminal trial of deposed Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and his wife Cilia Flores is officially set for June 1st of next year. The couple have been held in a Brooklyn detention center since a dramatic U.S. military raid in January, pleaded not guilty to federal narco-terrorism charges. While prosecutors allege a massive state-backed drug conspiracy, defense lawyers are aiming to throw the case out entirely. The judge scheduled a crucial preliminary hearing for November 17th to weigh the defense's claims that the couple's capture was a kidnapping. Natalie Rodriguez, Miami.
Allegations of race-based favoritism in admissions bringing a federal rights probe to East Carolina University's medical school. The Education Department launching the Brody School of Medicine investigation as part of a joint push with the Department of Justice. Federal officials have not disclosed what prompted the action, but they are looking into whether the school gave certain applicants an edge based on race following the Supreme Court's affirmative action ban. ECU was one of 5 medical schools added this week to a federal sweep covering 20 institutions nationwide. And Mark Mayfield tells us that big heat wave on the West Coast is leading to more smog in that area.
An ozone advisory starts today for parts of Los Angeles County. It will remain in effect through Monday night as a prolonged heat wave fuels a multi-day smog event. The South Coast Air Quality Management District says air quality is expected to reach unhealthy levels for sensitive groups in the San Fernando Valley and San Gabriel Valley. There will be unhealthy conditions or worse possible in the Santa Clarita Valley. Officials say that children, older adults, and people with asthma should limit prolonged outdoor exertion when the air quality reaches unhealthy levels. I'm Mark Mayfield.
And Tropical Storm Bertha, as we mentioned in the weather this morning, on its way to Texas. The National Hurricane Center says Bertha is now about 100 miles southwest of New Orleans and moving toward East Texas with sustained winds of 45 miles per hour. A tropical storm warning is in effect along the coast from the south of New Orleans to just west of Houston. That storm is expected to make landfall in Texas sometime this afternoon and move further inland this evening and is expected to maintain intensity until it starts moving over the land. And measles cases in the U.S. are hitting the highest number recorded in more than 3 decades. According to Johns Hopkins University's measles tracker, there have been 2,295 recorded measles cases this year, just surpassing 2025's total of 2,289. The U.S. officially eliminating measles back in 2000, but they say measles transmission has persisted for more than 1 year, bringing the nation's elimination status into question. And finally, in our news segment at 13 minutes past the hour, a Dallas seafood wholesaler ordered to pay $250,000 after admitting to falsely labeling the county of origin of salmon. Seafood supply company sentenced in federal court after pleading guilty to violating the Lacey Act of federal law prohibiting trafficking falsely labeled fish. Court records show the company identified Chilean salmon as imported from Scotland, making it easier for them to make more money on that product. We'll be right back. Minutes past the hour. Welcome back, Catholic Connection on a Thursday. Thanks for listening to the second hour at EWTN's Radio Extra. So we are in the middle of the year of St. Francis, in the middle of the year of St. Francis, which the Holy Father declared at the end of 2025, and it runs through January 10th of 2027. So I would encourage you to get a copy, first off, of my latest book, Italy, Shrines and Wonders, Volume 2, Due. And it's all about the life of St. Francis of Assisi. On the cover is my favorite image of St. Francis and that beautiful statue in front of the Basilica in Assisi. It's called The Return of St. Francis, and he's dressed as a soldier sitting on top of a horse with his head bowed toward the church and surrendering to God. There's a beautiful story about the statue in this book and in the first book as well. So grab this copy. It's a great resource for you, even if you're not going over to what I call the motherland for this beautiful pilgrimage year of St. Francis. It will transport you there. So will our beautiful EWTN series, which was put out earlier this year, right after Easter, which is free, The Unknown St. Francis of Assisi. Now, we know Francis is well known, but what many people don't realize is there are so many places that he visited where he had an impact, and we're talking mainly in Italy, where we went to 3 different regions. And so it's a beautifully shot series, and I think you'll enjoy it. And it's free, And you can find it at ewtn.com/St. Francis. And if you'd like to make a small donation to the network, you will get a copy of this beautiful new book. The pictures are really gorgeous. I think you're going to really love it. Plus, great information about this amazing saint. All right, so the year of St. Francis, what does that look like? What does that mean? Well, it's a holy year, and that means that you can obtain the plenary indulgence for this year's Franciscan Jubilee by visiting one of the Franciscan sites around the world. So obviously, if you're in Italy, you can go to many Franciscan sites there, but here as well. So to give you a little bit more background, let's take you back to last year when the Holy Year was declared, and we'll share with you part of a beautiful story that was done by EWTN and our Rome Bureau all about this big year of St. Francis, and then we'll talk about a few sites here in the United States that you can visit. And again, even if you're staying stateside, or even if you're going over to Italy before the end of the Jubilee year for St. Francis, you can still go to these places, many of which might even be in your own backyard. So let's find out a little bit more, and remind ourselves about the Franciscan Jubilee year. We're in the middle of it right now. Take a listen.
With a papal decree, Pope Leo XIV has proclaimed a Jubilee year dedicated to St. Francis, running from January the 10th, 2026 to January the 10th, 2027, a year in which every Christian is called to follow the example of the Saint of Assisi, carrying his timeless message of peace to the world with renewed commitment. 8 centuries have passed since the death of the poor man of Assisi, and his city is now at the heart of an extraordinary celebration, a moment that speaks not only to believers, but to all of humanity.
Assisi becomes indeed a capital, but a capital of what? Of witnesses, men and women like Francis, like Claire, and now Carlo Acutis joins them. People who said, yes, it is possible. Slow down. Stop for every brother you meet. This is what I feel called to say to every baptized Christian. It does not matter who you run for in life. What matters is who you are able to stop for. Because if you have run so fast and missed the essential relationships, you will find yourself caught in a great restlessness, and you will taste nothing of life.
For 800 years, the symbol of this forgiveness and this indulgence has been the Porziuncola, housed within the Basilica of Santa Maria degli Angeli, the very place where St. Francis of Assisi came to understand his vocation, founded the Order of the Friars Minor, and gave the world the inspiration of the Pardon of Assisi.
It was here, at the Porziuncola, that Francis, after the Pardon of Assisi, declared, "I want to send you all to heaven, and heaven is already here. But one must stop in order to listen to oneself and to hear the voice that dwells within."
For pilgrims journeying to Assisi in 2026, a rare and precious gift awaits: the Pardon of Assisi, made available once again through the plenary indulgence granted by Pope Leo XIV.
Francis is a significant figure, and the Church, through the Holy Father, recognizes that he can be meaningful even for those who are not, strictly speaking, Franciscan, because he is precisely this blessing. Those who listen to him live as brothers and sisters. Those who listen to him live in peace. Those who listen to him care for nature. Those who listen to him build relationships founded on respect and service.
Just absolutely beautiful, and it's such a wonderful reminder that so much is available to us as Catholics in a Jubilee year, outside of a Jubilee year, the beautiful sacraments that we have, and over 10,000 saints, and of course St. Francis is at the top of the list for many of us because he was such a powerhouse and such an incredible mystic and a leader in prayer and all things Christ. All right, so there was a beautiful article, as I said, that I received from a friend of mine. It's posted on Aletheia this morning. If you'd like to obtain the plenary indulgence for this year's Franciscan Jubilee and visit one of the sites, check out these 7 sites in the U.S. And the title of the article is 7 U.S. Sites to Visit for St. Francis's Jubilee Year. For this extraordinary occasion, there's a possibility of obtaining a plenary indulgence under the usual conditions: detachment from all sin, going to confession, receiving communion, and praying for the Pope's intentions, alongside a pilgrimage to a site dedicated to St. Francis's order. And that means any Franciscan conventual church or sanctuary named after St. Francis. The sick, elderly, and homebound, this article says, can also obtain the indulgence by offering their prayers and sufferings to God spiritually. All right, so they picked 7 sites across the country, including the National Shrine of St. Francis of Assisi in San Francisco, California, of course, a city that carries his name, the Franciscan Monastery of the Holy Land in America, in our nation's capital, the Cathedral Basilica of St. Francis of Assisi in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and all the beautiful California mission churches. There are 21 that were established by Franciscans along the California coast between 1769 and 1823. The St. Franciscan Center in Tampa, Florida. In Garrison, New York, the Holy Mountain Franciscan Retreat there. And they also mention a beautiful mission in St. Augustine, Florida. So these are 7 places across the country, and we're blessed in the state of Michigan to have a number of them as well, including the amazing Solanus Casey Center in the Detroit area, just outside. It's called St. Bonaventure Monastery. This is where Solanus Casey is buried, and it's just outside downtown Detroit. So it's just beautiful. That's where, as I said, the great Capuchin priest who was beatified, who was a blessed Solanus Casey, is buried. You can go to the monastery, you can visit the soup kitchen and see all the wonderful work they do for the poor, and you can also walk through a wonderful museum dedicated to the life of this very humble Capuchin, of course, blessed Solanus Casey. We also have a fantastic Capuchin Retreat Center in what's known as Washington Township, which is about, I'd say, 40 minutes north of Detroit in a lovely suburb that's mainly countryside and sits right next to a large park known as Stony Creek with a lot of rivers and beautiful grounds and whatnot. So it's just stunning. So again, I'm sure there are places in your area named after the great saint or associated with St. Francis. And this is an opportunity, whether you are going to Italy for this very important year, or if you're staying stateside, you can do both. But to really make that effort to be closer to St. Francis and learn about him, one of the things that we've learned living in Umbria, which is the land of St. Francis, right, where he was born and raised and where he spent a good deal of his time, is that he was just so sold out for Christ. He had such a zeal for the Lord. And that's why he loved nature so much, because he believed that everything reflects the glory of God. And he loved Christ so much in the Eucharist that he spoke and wrote about the Eucharist more than any other topic or issue in his short lifetime. And he loved the church so much, and he loved Jesus so much, and he made sure that local parishes in his area and beyond were in the proper condition to celebrate the Mass, the highest form of prayer in the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Many people don't think that he rebuilt churches. They think that he misunderstood the message from the San Damiano cross of Jesus saying, "Francis rebuilt my church." But Francis did do that figuratively, spiritually, literally. He rebuilt the body of Christ with his mission and his zeal, but he also rebuilt several churches. So let's do some more prayers, calling on the intercession of St. Francis, especially in this Jubilee year. We'll be right back. I encourage you to go to the excellent website of our guest, our regular guest, Father Tad Pacholczyk, fathertad.com, and Father is spelled out, of course, F-A-T-H-E-R, Tad, T-A-D.com. A wealth of information Father is, and he shares a lot of that information with great videos and links and articles on his website. You can also contact him there for speaking engagements, which I would highly recommend. In addition to his great website, Father Tad is a PhD, earning his doctorate in neuroscience from Yale, doing postdoctoral work at Harvard, ordained back in 1999 as a priest of the Diocese of Fall River, Massachusetts, currently serving again as a senior ethicist at the wonderful National Catholic Bioethics Center in Philadelphia. Father, thank you so much for joining us. And so we were talking about this when it hadn't had the final approval yet, but it was moving in that direction. And now France has gone ahead and approved euthanasia. Your thoughts initially when you heard the news, Father, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, well, Teresa, this is something, as you know, that they've been battling back and forth over, and pretty much there's been enough opposition up to this point that it hasn't gone very far. But through some legislative wrangling, they got it basically to pass. And it's not completely over, my understanding is, because it can still be taken or referred to the Constitutional Council. Mm-hmm. But the likelihood that the Constitutional Council is going to throw this out doesn't seem super high. So in other words, it looks like we're dealing probably with a fait accompli here. I mean, this is done. And France is now legalized euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide. So this is shocking. This should be shocking to all of us. I mean, such a Catholic place, such a religious place, and it just gives you some insight into the level of decline that has crept in and the power of our non-believing society's messages, infiltrating, permeating people's minds and switching them into a perspective that says, oh, this is okay. Being able to kill yourself is some kind of real freedom, when, of course, it's the opposite of freedom. It's a kind of slavery and failure to understand the human condition when you're suffering and what that suffering means. It's just really very, very tragic. And as I say, for me, you're asking what was my impression. I was just shocked, frankly, and very disappointed. And, I mean, we've seen it elsewhere. We've seen it in Canada, right, which also had a tremendous Catholic constituency, and all of that has gone by the wayside.
Right.
So, Christians everywhere should be on alert, I think, that this is coming, to a place near you, and we need to be taking steps here to be sure that we're informed on this issue, that we can articulate why this is a nonsensical approach to dealing with hardship in life. It's a failure on every level.
Well, what's so sad as well, as you mentioned, the Catholic connection in Canada and also France, if you look at the leadership of France, for example, Emmanuel Macron, who's set to sign this, or maybe he's already signed it, he's Catholic. Where's his faith? And what about the leaders in Canada? The same thing. Let me give a summary of what the bill actually does. A bill titled A Right to Aid in Dying legalizes both euthanasia administered by a doctor or nurse and assisted suicide, in which the patient self-administers a lethal substance. Access is restricted to adults who are stable residents of France, suffer from a serious and incurable condition in an advanced or terminal phase, experience suffering that cannot be relieved by treatment, and remain able to express their will freely and with full understanding throughout the process. Now that sounds, we don't believe in this, but it sounds like they're taking all of these safeguards. On paper, it reads this way, but we know with so much history behind this in other places that this is not the case. Not that we would ever support it anyway, but they're trying to, mitigate this and mute this a little bit. Oh, it's not that bad. We're really going to control this.
Absolutely, and it is a kind of fiction to just get the nose of the camel, under the tent, and I think they've succeeded. Plenty of things here are not likely to hold up. So, they say only French legal resistance and, residents and, citizens.
No, people will be coming in, just like they cross the state lines to have abortions.
Yes, exactly. It'll be just like that, parallel. And they say you have to be 18 and over. Well, what happened in the Netherlands? Moved all the way down to doing euthanasia on newborns. So it's coming. This stuff, you put in these things that are arbitrary sort of statements, people aren't going to respect those. They don't even define what it means when you say, oh, the disease threatens life. What does that mean?
Right.
Everything is left completely unspecified, and that's a huge danger. But as you said, even if they were to specify this to a higher degree of precision, it's not going to make much difference in the long run. People are going to redo the law as they've been doing it, Canada and Oregon and elsewhere, getting rid of waiting periods, just making it all quick. Because if you make this decision that, killing yourself is good, it's a good thing, then it becomes, well, why are you telling me that I have, incurable mental illness and I can't kill myself? What gives here? You said it's a good thing for us to have this available to people, and I want to do it. That becomes the mindset. And, of course, typically when all this started, years and decades ago, they would write in limitations, say, if you have mental illness, if you have depression, that's a no-go, you're going to be ruled out. But even that is becoming a lower and lower barrier. We see it in Canada, where mental health issues do become grounds to carry this out. So, these things are really a fiction, and I think you always have to push back, as you so often do on your show so nicely, to the financial piece. Because at the end of the day, France's National Health Service is going to pay for this, and they realize this is going to save a ton of money, because you get these expensive patients who need complicated cancer treatments or other surgeries, and we can just sort of do them in here or let them do themselves in, wow, we're going to save a ton of money. Isn't this a great answer? So, I'm being a little sarcastic, but you can
not too sarcastic, Father, because look at we talked about this previously. Remember that story about the woman in Canada who went for her first exam after she was diagnosed with breast cancer? She had just found out, and the doctor told her she could take her own life.
Exactly. Great example. That's right. I'm afraid that's going to become more and more part of it. And as this gets, integrated into the curriculum for forming future doctors, it's very unfortunate. The whole thing has moved in the wrong way. And, there was this bishop in France who had a lot of courage and basically said, look, if you were one of the lawmakers who voted for this, you got to look at your heart here. You got to understand you should not be presenting yourself for Holy Communion at Mass.
Yeah, Bishop Mark, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Aillet, A-I-L-L-E-T, has warned ahead of France's divisive vote on July 15th, this is a few weeks ago, that Catholic lawmakers who support the bill will no longer be able to receive communion. I want to talk about that when we come back. I hope they follow up on this, because sometimes that's difficult because you have, priests operating in their own parishes and whatnot, and how do they make sure that this is really followed through, because that is going to make the politicians think about it at least, and maybe they'll have a second thought, even though they may have already voted for this. The other thing, Father, too, that we can talk about on the other side of the break, which is extremely sad, is that they miss the whole point. Those who are supporting this miss the whole point of what comes out of suffering. Now, we're not saying that people who are ill and struggling with severe pain, the church doesn't teach that they have to suffer needlessly or suffer in great pain. There are ways to treat the patients with love and care and good medications. The church doesn't say, just deal with it, you'll be fine. But the opportunity to grow and to learn through suffering and to really talk to family and friends, especially, God forbid, if it's a very serious situation. So much good can come out of suffering when we offer it up and live up to our Catholic teachings. We'll talk more about that with Father Ted Pacholczyk, the one and only from the National Catholic Bioethics Center, diving into this very sad situation in France, which is spreading like wildfire around the world, the support for euthanasia. A Catholic engaged in public life cannot ignore the Church's constant teaching against euthanasia. That's a quote from Bishop Aillet, who was speaking with the France Catholic newspaper in an interview earlier this month. And by the way, we have several stories on EWTNnews.com and the National Catholic Register, ncregister.com, on this. He highlighted that Christian faith engages a person's whole existence and that every lawmaker must examine in conscience whether the acts they take align with the faith they profess. So, Father, this bishop from southern France, God bless him, he's the one who's saying that these politicians who voted for this should not be receiving communion. My hope is that this will be taken seriously, though, by the local pastors. Oftentimes it is not. Thanks for joining us again.
Yes, I'm totally with you on that. I hope this will serve as a trigger to really get some further public discussion and awareness around this issue as people say, wow, the church is saying you shouldn't present yourself for Holy Communion. Oh, maybe this is more serious than we had thought. So, yes, I think it takes a lot of courage to do something like this. And, the same sort of rationale applies for lawmakers who vote for direct abortions or, any of these other sorts of violations, direct violations of human life. And we have to there's a kind of, the term that's sometimes used, there's an ecclesial coherence. And people know that. And this is why the Catholic Church has the appeal that it has, despite the strength of the world's message, because there really is a coherence. And meanwhile, the message, I should be able to kill myself or kill my baby or whatever, people know that there's an incoherence about that, when on the one hand you're professing that you should be loving others and treating them as you yourself would like to be treated. And, there's all kinds of incoherence. So I agree with you. Praise God for the bishops who do this, and really clarify for their flock that there are real lines here, and you are risking, potentially, your salvation if you're voting publicly and outright in favor of these kinds of radically unjust and immoral laws.
And to me, it's just so mind-blowing that France, which was such a Catholic country at one point, and the saints from France, Father. I mean, I found an article that listed 14 saints from France, and there's more, but they mention, of course, Saint Bernadette of Subaru, Saint John Vianney, Saint Therese of Lisieux, Saint Genevieve, Saint Louis. I mean, so many others, and Saint Joan of Arc, of course, a great saint. On and on and on, this long list, and this is just 14 of them. There's many more, as I mentioned, and here we are in the 21st century, and this happens, you know?
It's unbelievable, really, and I'm sure all those saints you mentioned are praying hard for the future of France, you know, wanting to rescue and call it back to its beautiful patrimony in the faith. It goes back centuries, if not millennia. It's like, wow. So, yeah, this is an important, pivotal moment. People should be aware of how easy it is to kind of fall, if you will, fall from grace, even, you know, in that broader national sense. And we need to, in the U.S., be watching things closely because we are getting all kinds of states that are doing initiatives to legalize this. And this needs to be a kind of constant backdrop for us because I always remind people, look, the people who do this, you know, whether you're talking Massachusetts or New York or wherever, they do it and then they get beaten back. But then what happens? A year or two later, they're back reintroducing their legislative initiative, and they don't stop.
No, they don't stop. The left doesn't sleep. They don't sleep.
It doesn't. And we need to be like that in terms of pushing back and even building up stronger barricades against evils like this.
I think what's really sad as well is that the beauty of suffering and growing through your situation is completely ignored. Now, what's beautiful about the church is the church does not want people to suffer needlessly. If you read the church teachings on this, they're encouraging really good care, pain medication, to be with the person, to walk alongside that person in whatever situation they find themselves. But that suicide, euthanasia, is never the answer. And there's so much that you gain. I mean, Romans 8:28, how many scriptures do we hear and read that deal with suffering? I mean, the greatest evil, right, our Lord's crucifixion and his suffering was our greatest victory. And yet we don't stop and think about that.
Precisely. You know, and there's this little phrase that you may recall from the liturgy, which just says very simply, a death he freely accepted. And there's so much to meditate on that and to ponder, because this is where the whole euthanasia thing gets going. It's like, no, I don't want to die that way. This is, you know, I want to be in control sort of thing. And now, the desire to be in control is itself a good desire. But if you want real control, then you've got to be able to say, like Jesus did, whatever the death that's coming my way, whether it's cancer, liver disease, heart attack, whatever it is, I freely accept it. A death he freely accepted. And to be able to say that, that's being in real control. And people haven't understood that. They think, no, being in control means that I ingest a toxin and destroy my body and, you know, make some kind of supposedly quick and easy exit, as everybody around me and my family, you know, is then having to suffer additionally because of my bad choice. You know, it's all, we have to return to the reality of suffering as redemptive. I think a lot of times when we say, oh, suffering is redemptive, we don't unpack that.
Right.
And, you know, Jesus' death, as you're pointing out, was the highest manifestation of his love, his acceptance, because he did it on purpose for you and me. And wow, what a thing to do, to be able to say, yes, I freely accept this, whatever's coming. And, you know, then he was in control. Now you can say, well, he wasn't really in control because the scribes and the Pharisees and others around him were plotting his death. And yet at the end of the day, he was God, and he allowed those circumstances to precisely play out so his designs were realized. Well, you know what? It's the same thing. Teresa, however you're going to die one day, or however I'm going to die as Father Tad, Jesus knows every one of those circumstances, and he's inviting us to say, I will accept this, Lord, whatever you are opening this. And it may be a hard road, you're right, and there may be some pain and suffering, and he's going to allow us to, you know, take palliative measures, The help of hospice, when done well, is a great grace as we're dying, etc. Pain management, is important. But to really say in our heart of hearts that we're going to accept this empowers fully. And it's like, then nobody's taking my life from me, and I'm not taking my own life either. I am saying yes all the way to the next life, which is, infinite, unending, and eternal, and so different from here, where all suffering has a limit. Even though it's true, it can be very difficult, even brutal, it has a stopping point. And we need to remind ourselves of these basic truths that, meanwhile, eternity doesn't end. So don't make a mistake here that's throwing anything into jeopardy. Be sure you are turning to Him who went through all of this ahead of time for each of us in that remarkable way. And understand, too, Teresa, the whole thing about Him dying for you and me, I think when I am dealing with somebody who is tempted to maybe, consider the option that's now legal wherever they live to commit suicide, and if you can say something to them like, well, what about your son? He's way away from the church. He's been away for 20 years. You want to see him come back, right? Oh, yeah, I do, actually. Why don't you offer your sufferings for your son? And they all of a sudden, they brighten up. And they're like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. Wow, how powerful is that? Yes, let me do that, So we have so much here and God is accompanying us and giving us strength in those really difficult moments. And we discovered if we're willing to try to go through them hand in hand with God, praying, and praying the chaplet of the Divine Mercy and turning to our Blessed Mother, wow, it becomes possible. She stood at the foot of that terrible cross and watched this terrible tragedy unfold right in front of her eyes of her one single beloved son.
Yeah. Our Lady of Sorrows. What's very powerful when you think about it, I really believe, and maybe this is a reporter in me, connecting the dots and following the money trail. When this is what they do, this is what the left does. They make an evil look like a good, as it says in Scripture, woe to those who say good is evil and evil is good. They make this seem as a good. And what this does is this releases them from real responsibility and real answers in terms of working with people who are struggling. And at whatever level, it makes it a lot easier to say, well, what do you want from me? You can just go, take your life. If you look at, for example, all these different issues, right? Look at abortion. They sell that as, a right to choose and freedom and reproductive rights. At the end of the day, they're making money on it. And they're also, that means there's one less mouth to feed, or so they try to think about this, right, for population control. With suicide, the same thing. It's easier. What about dealing with all these different mental health issues that are out there? There are so many people struggling with mental health issues. Instead of really digging in, pulling up our sleeves and, rolling up our boots or our pants and getting, into the nitty gritty, it's a lot easier to just put this out there as a solution when what it really takes is all of us coming together and helping one another.
That's so true. And you're right, it's harder to really care for those who have mental illness than sometimes to kind of write them off or marginalize them, etc., put them out of sight, and maybe don't worry too much if they do get sucked into this vortex of assisted suicide. And, what you're saying about the left and, those who promote these things, they're trying to say that an evil is good. And as you know, I'm a big fan of sort of extending the logic here. And I say, well, how about assisted drownings? Let's not just have assisted suicide. Let's have
or pushing somebody off a bridge and helping them. Just say, okay, I'll help you. I'll give you a push.
Go.
Right.
And have people, at the seashore who will give you a millstone and drag you down.
Yeah.
It's like, and maybe they could even be lifeguards. You call them lifeguards, like we call our doctors those who care for life, but the doctors are the ones who are being asked to write the prescription for the toxin that's going to kill me. It's like, oh, do I want a lifeguard who's going to be doing assisted drownings to watch over my family when we're at the beach swimming? It's that sort of contradiction we need to, remind people. And the logic really goes out the window. That's the end of the story here. I think good becomes evil and evil becomes good. This is the transposition that the Lord God doesn't want us to yield to.
This is what we need to do, though, to have these types of conversations. In addition to being on the radio, we have the gift, thanks be to God, to put this out there in front of millions of people. But we should all be discerning like this in terms of what does it mean? Connect the dots. Think about it. The Catholic faith is a thinking person's religion. And it's so deep and it's so beautiful. The other thing that really gets my Italian up, Father, is when I see, when you look at things through everything, as my friend Al Cresta used to say, through the lens of Scripture and the teachings of the Church, everything becomes clearer. I can even watch a movie and look at the message that they're getting out there. It may be a very positive message without even anything Catholic or Christian. I really like stories of the underdogs, the people who fight through suffering, who come out on top. That's why we love the Rocky movies and watch them over and over and over again. Why can Hollywood and the culture see the beauty in these stories of people who go through suffering and are victorious in the end? They explain very beautifully in film how they learned from that suffering. You know, what Rocky learned, what other great heroes in movies have learned. There were always lessons along the way that made them stronger, not weaker. And yet, when it comes to everyday life, if you have a terminal illness or you're struggling, not, in many cases, it's not even a terminal illness, not that it would make it right, but there's a failure to see the beauty in that process and the learning that can take place.
Yeah, you know, you're mentioning Rocky and these other great examples, and I'll just throw in one more that I've always been impressed by, which is Malcolm Muggeridge. I'm sure you remember his name. He started out like as a hardcore communist, right? When he was younger. And then he sort of gradually progressed towards Christianity. At the end of his life, he and his wife, Kitty, became Catholic. Well, when he reflected back over his whole life, he made this comment. He said, the only time I really grew during my life was when I suffered. Now,
yeah, Father, great way to wrap up the program. Thank you so much. We'll be right back. Don't forget to check out Father Tad Pacholczyk's fantastic website. He has videos that you can download, all kinds of different papers and articles. It's simply fathertad.com. The word father is spelled out, fathertad.com. You know, this is what Sister was talking about, Sister Mota, in the first segment, when you're discerning. Now, discerning happens with our vocations that can change over time. But discerning also happens when we're looking at various issues. And there is so much truth and beauty and depth from which to draw in the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. It's endless. Just drawing on the wisdom of a particular saint can help you through a great trial. I mean, we're so blessed in the Church to have so much from which to draw upon. All right. So tomorrow, we have a great lineup for you. I'm very excited to have Bishop Daniel Thomas on with us. He is the head of the USCCB's Pro-Life Committee. And you know, we are in the week of Natural Family Planning Awareness, and this is a great letter that the bishops wrote to the government talking about the importance of natural family planning in light of this push for IVF, in vitro fertilization. And that's another teaching that people don't understand. And they complain and say, oh, the church is supposed to be so pro-life. But how pathetic and how hypocritical is it that they're against IVF? Well, there are reasons for that, and very good reasons, if we would just stop and discern and pray. And here's a concept that I didn't do for years, so I'm looking at myself, brothers and sisters. How about reading what the church has to teach? We'll also be visited by the wonderful Father Timothy Gallagher, and we'll have Fact Check Friday. Have a great Thursday. Talk to you tomorrow on a Friday. Ciao.